What happens when the person you least expect becomes the one you can't live without? Welcome to Happiness of Love, your daily dose of K-dramas. Get ready to fall in love with unforgettable stories. Can you tell us where are you listening from? Naomi Tanaka stood at the threshold of her new life, heart racing with the exhilaration of finally owning her own apartment. The sunlight cast soft shadows across the sleek, modern living space in her quiet Tokyo neighborhood, illuminating the clean lines of the furniture and the fresh scent of paint that lingered in the air. This was at the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifices. But her moment of triumph evaporated in an instant. She dropped her suitcases with a thud, her excitement crashing into disbelief as she came face to face with Ryan Nakamura, her notoriously cold and inflexible boss, who stood unyieldingly in the doorway, arms crossed and expression as frigid as ever. The surprise of seeing him there was quickly replaced by frustration. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice tinged with disbelief. Ryan, ever the perfectionist, merely raised an eyebrow at her reaction, unmoved by her presence in what he considered his territory for just a moment longer. An excruciating silence stretched between them as they both grappled with the reality of the situation. A mix-up in the lease left them both claiming legal rights to the apartment. "You know I need more time to relocate," he stated matter-of-factly, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Naomi could feel her exhaustion from the long home buying process bubbling to the surface, and she refused to back down. "This is my home now, Ryan. I'm not going anywhere." Their eyes locked in a fierce standoff, and an argument sparked to life, igniting a firestorm of indignation. Voices rose, each word sharp enough to slice through the air, magnifying every sense in the already charged atmosphere. Each unwilling concession felt like a blow, a battle of wills revealing the stark contrast between their personalities. No furniture arrangement or decor plans could ever ease the tension radiating between them. By the next day at work, Naomi forced herself to wear a mask of normalcy, but the weight of the previous evening gnawed at her insides. Colleagues passed by, their casual chatter filled with hints of concern as May, her keen-eyed coworker, caught on to Naomi's unusually tense demeanor. "What's going on? You look like you saw a ghost," May remarked, her head tilting in curiosity. Naomi offered a weak smile, her thoughts spiraling back to Ryan's impenetrable gaze and the way he had challenged her the moment she crossed into her new home. When the letter arrived confirming that neither of them could be evicted due to legal loopholes, an avalanche of realization cascaded over Naomi. She was trapped with Ryan, and there was no turning back. Overwhelmed, they reluctantly agreed to create an official contract spelling out their coexistence. Clarity emerged in a flurry of stipulations: strict rules, designated common areas, a chore schedule, and a commitment to zero personal interactions outside the office. As they extended their hands in an uneasy truce, the palpable tension lingered in the air. Underneath the surface, unacknowledged emotions simmered, with a volatile blend of curiosity and resentment sparking like fireworks between them. Little did they know that this unique arrangement would soon unravel the carefully built barriers around their hearts, pushing them to confront themselves and each other in unexpected ways. In the quiet aftermath of their reluctant agreement, Naomi took a breath, unaware of the journey that lay ahead, or how much this new reality would challenge everything she thought she understood about herself and about Ryan Nakamura. Living with Ryan proves to be more difficult than Naomi expected as each day unfolds into a tangle of conflicts, their personalities clashing like mismatched puzzle pieces. Ryan, with his obsessive attention to cleanliness, has constructed an elaborate cleaning schedule that would make even the most organized of individuals tremble. He scolds her for minor infractions that she barely notices, like leaving a coffee cup in the sink or not wiping down the counters to his exacting standards. Naomi finds herself navigating this meticulously ordered world while struggling to hold on to her more relaxed habits, which leads to constant squabbles over everything from the thermostat settings to bathroom schedules. She often rolls her eyes in exasperation when Ryan chastises her about the temperature, insisting that he doesn't need to freeze in order to maintain control over his living space. Meanwhile, Ryan mutters under his breath about the inadequacies of spontaneous living, unable to grasp why chaos feels like freedom to her. At work, their dynamic grows even more strained as they grapple with the intertwining of their professional and personal lives. Ryan, oblivious to the growing tension, assigns Naomi an important presentation for a major client, clearly testing her under pressure to see if she can rise to the occasion. She feels a rush of stress under his scrutinizing gaze, convinced that he's deliberately aiming to push her buttons because of their living situation. It's as if their every interaction at the office becomes charged with unspoken judgments. In the midst of meetings, she catches him watching her with his hawkish eyes, as if he's gauging every move she makes. May, her bubbly coworker, picks up on Naomi's uncharacteristically flustered behavior, raising an eyebrow and throwing knowing glances in her direction. The playful jabs from her coworkers only heighten Naomi's sense of vulnerability, as she desperately tries to focus on her tasks amid the whirlwind of emotion swirling within her. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Naomi returns home late, fatigue weighing her down like a lead blanket. She trudges through the door, expecting another mundane evening filled with passive aggression and the irritatingly pristine order of Ryan's world. However, she is met with an unexpected sight. Ryan has cooked dinner. The aroma of perfectly sautéed vegetables and spiced chicken permeates the air, and for a moment, she stands there, frozen. This isn't the cold man who critiques every detail of her work. This is a side of him she's never seen, a man willing to pour his effort into creating something comforting, driven by sheer practicality, refusing to let the kitchen fall into chaos even if it means indulging in the occasional cooked meal himself. Naomi's heart softens at the sight of him stirring a pot, a raw vulnerability flickering behind his normally stoic demeanor. She feels a tug of curiosity seep into her thoughts as she watches him in awe, a new question blossoming within her. Could it be that there's more to Ryan than his cold exterior suggests? As they share dinner, a meal she hesitatingly admits was remarkably delicious, Naomi finds herself opening up, if only a little, about her day. She recounts the obstacles she faced while preparing for the impending presentation, her initial nervousness giving way to laughter as she recounts a mishap with a client that left her more red-faced than she would care to admit. Ryan listens intently, a small smile breaking through his usually impassive expression as he nods along. It's a complicated balance of camaraderie and rivalry that they maintain, but for that particular moment, their barriers feel a little less rigid, allowing a warmth to flow between them. As she glances at Ryan, she notes the way his eyes soften ever so slightly, revealing glimpses of the man behind the perfectionist facade as they share this intimate silence, bonding over the struggles both feel in their high-pressure lives. It's a delicate shift that doesn't go unnoticed, leaving Naomi apprehensive yet strangely hopeful about what the future holds between them. As the days pass, Naomi and Ryan find themselves entangled in a peculiar yet functional routine that reflects their contrasting lifestyles more than they'd care to admit. Each morning begins with the ritual of brewing coffee, the rich aroma filling the air as Naomi prepares her usual mug, while Ryan meticulously pours his espresso shot with precision, his focus unwavering. Their contrasting habits reveal their personalities, Naomi's lighthearted approach only slightly dimming in the shadow of Ryan's nearly obsessive orderliness. Naomi soon learns that Ryan has a tendency to stay up late, absorbed in a world of spreadsheets and reports, the faint glow of his laptop illuminating the otherwise dark apartment, while she, in contrast, often finds her own thoughts drifting during quiet evenings, eloquently expressed in soft mutterings to herself. It becomes an unintentional revelation for Ryan to discover that Naomi articulates her ideas out loud, a habit that strikes him as both charming and disarming, breaking through the facade of her easygoing nature. Small moments of intimacy begin to creep into their days, swirling like the steam rising from their respective coffee mugs. One evening, after a particularly taxing day, Naomi unwittingly drifts into slumber on the couch, the tension of the day melting away. As she gently snuggles deeper into the cushions, Ryan walks in, ignores the knot of discomfort in his chest, and absent-mindedly covers her with a soft blanket, a gesture that surprises even him. Yet, as he turns away, he scolds himself for such a lapse, shaking off the stir of warmth that suddenly blooms in his chest. Meanwhile, the excitement at their workplace is palpable, with the anticipation of an important product launch looming on the horizon. Naomi, tasked with working closely alongside Ryan, feels an undercurrent of tension build with each passing day. Their professional collaboration requires them to strategize long hours, the space between them shrinking as they pore over designs and marketing plans. This close proximity stirs something within Naomi, a fluttering that begins to become familiar with every time Ryan rolls up his sleeves, revealing his toned forearms, or when he glances her way with a rare, contemplative expression. It's unsettling yet exhilarating, igniting a side of her she had long kept in check due to her prior disappointments. Surrounded by the buzz of their energetic coworkers, they appear composed to the outside world, but internally, the perceptible energy crackles between them, as palpable as the hum of the electric lights above. When Erica pays a surprise visit one evening, she instantly senses the shift in Naomi's demeanor. "You're definitely blushing," she teases, her voice sing-songy as she nudges Naomi with an almost accusatory grin, living with an attractive, emotionally unavailable boss? "That sounds like a recipe for disaster, sis." Naomi laughs it off, but her heart stutters in her chest, trying to dispel the notion that in some strange, twisted fate, her sister could be onto something. She brushes off Erica's concern, but a niggling doubt lingers, challenging her to confront the undeniable chemistry simmering just beneath the surface of their cohabitation. As evening gives way to a calming night, the shared warmth from their cohabitation becomes increasingly loaded with unspoken words, their lives intricately intertwined in ways they are only beginning to comprehend. As Naomi and Ryan adjusted to their unusual living arrangement, the boundary of professional decorum began to erode, revealing hidden dimensions beneath their rigid exteriors. One particularly rainy evening, a sudden storm swept through Tokyo, drenching the city and causing an unexpected blackout that enveloped their apartment in darkness. Flickering candles illuminated the room, casting dancing shadows on the walls and creating an environment that felt oddly intimate despite the lingering tension. The rhythmic sound of rain tapping against the window created a soothing backdrop, washing away the pressure that typically characterized their household interactions. Sitting on opposite ends of the couch, they exchanged glances that lingered a heartbeat too long, the air thick with unspoken thoughts and feelings. The constraints of the world outside seemed to evaporate, leaving them in a bubble suspended in time, and it was in this cocoon that Ryan spoke up, catching Naomi off guard when he said that he once had a fiancé. Naomi leaned in slightly, her interest piqued, as he continued to explain how he had broken off the engagement, confessing that his workaholic tendencies had driven a wedge between them. Watching his usually steely expression soften as he shared this story peeled back the layers of the guarded man she had known, exposing a vulnerability she never imagined existed beneath his meticulous facade. Naomi knew the weight of her own struggles, and in turn, she opened up about her experiences with imposter syndrome, how she often felt like she was merely pretending to fit in her successful life, despite having fought hard for every triumph. The conversation flowed freely between them, evolving into an exchange that felt both refreshing and liberating. Ryan gazed into her eyes with an intensity that made her heart flutter. For a moment, they were not about the office politics or the chaos of cohabitation. They were simply two individuals sharing their truths in a space where the outside world felt irrelevant. Laughter erupted between them when Naomi playfully mentioned how she often fantasized about cooking gourmet meals but often ended up ordering takeout instead when faced with the reality of her culinary skills. Ryan replied, a hint of a smile breaking through as he described a catastrophic attempt at baking that had left his kitchen in a sugar-coated disaster. They both laughed as the candle flickered, casting light on their faces, momentarily masking their insecurities with this newfound connection. But as the night wore on and exhaustion washed over them, the weight of reality crept back in. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the curtains, Ryan returned to his cold and pragmatic self, the memories of their intimate night scattered like autumn leaves in the wind, leaving Naomi feeling perplexed and unsettled by the shift back to formality. Despite the warmth of their previous night, she sensed the invisible walls rebuilding between them, each brick reinforcing the earlier version of their relationship, which was fraught with professional tensions and grudging tolerances. A knot of confusion tightened in her stomach as she watched him go about his day, precise in his movements, so different from the man who had shared so much the night before. Meanwhile, or perhaps in consequence, May's keen instincts picked up on the subtle shifts in the atmosphere, giving her ample reason to suspect that an unspoken change was brewing between her sister and the notoriously aloof executive. Her investigative nature kicked into gear. With a twitch of her expertly manicured eyebrows, she resolved to play the role of detective and find out just what was going on in the apartment that hummed with a tension neither Naomi nor Ryan could quite understand. As Naomi navigated her workday, she couldn't shake the feeling that their connection had transformed into something more complex, leaving her to ponder whether they were on the precipice of uncovering new depths of understanding or whether the abrupt return to their previous roles signaled a slippery slope toward inevitable chaos. The possibilities danced around her mind, leaving her both breathless with anticipation and burdened with self-doubt, unsure of where this strange relationship would ultimately lead. Tension simmered between Naomi and Ryan as they found themselves pulled into a maelstrom of chaos that had erupted at work, forcing them into a weekend together that neither had anticipated. The air was thick with a sense of urgency, electric and crackling, as they sat across from each other at the dining table, papers strewn around them like confetti after a storm. The scent of stale coffee hung in the air, mingling with the tension that simmered unseen. With a high-profile client's campaign looming just hours away, frustration hung like a heavy fog, and not even the polite distance of their cohabitation agreement seemed to matter anymore. Every time Ryan's pen scratched against the paper, it felt like a sharp jab, and every sigh from Naomi felt like a silent rebuke echoing in the cramped space of the apartment. When Ryan snapped at her for misplacing a file, her patience cracked, and her voice rose in defiance, fueling the escalating conflict. She accused him of never trusting anyone but himself, her words hanging in the air like a challenge, potent and charged. To her surprise, Ryan leaned back in his chair and met her gaze, his expression shifting to one of uncharacteristic vulnerability, as he admitted that reliance on others had only led to disappointment throughout his life. His voice was low and heavy with unspoken burdens, revealing a glimpse of the loneliness that lurked beneath the surface of his chiseled exterior, and Naomi's heart ached at the sight of this man often so cold and unyielding opening up in front of her. It was a revelation that caught her off guard, causing her anger to dissipate and morph into something softer, more understanding. The night stretched on, their words mingling with the dim light of the lamp, and somehow, amid the clutter of deadlines and conflicts, Naomi found herself laughing genuinely at one of Ryan's rare sarcastic remarks. It was an unexpected spark between them. For the first time, they weren't just bosses and employees, but two flawed individuals grappling with their pasts and unraveling the tangled threads of their own lives. The realization hung in the air, elusive yet undeniable, as they both hesitated before retreating to their respective rooms, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in their relationship lingering in the charged atmosphere. Meanwhile, May, ever the perceptive observer, had been piecing together the changes she noticed in Naomi, the way her eyes sparkled with something deeper when she spoke of work, or the flush that crept onto her cheeks when Ryan entered a room. May's instincts told her that Naomi was concealing more than just a simple professional relationship, and driven by curiosity and a tinge of protectiveness, she began formulating plans to uncover the truth hidden beneath the surface of Naomi's evolving life with Ryan. After the whirlwind weekend, Naomi and Ryan resumed their usual routines at the office, each weighed down by the secret transformations brewing in their hearts. As they entered the sleek, glass-walled boardroom, Naomi felt a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. To the outside world, they maintained their poised, professional appearances. However, beneath the surface, the tension between them crackled with a newfound intensity. During meetings, Ryan found himself increasingly distracted by Naomi's subtle habits, the way she absent-mindedly twirled her pen, her brow furrowing in concentration as she jotted down notes, or how her lips would softly nip at each other when deep in thought. It was as if he was encountering a different side of her, one that captivated him in ways he had never imagined. On the other side of the conference table, Naomi couldn't escape the weight of Ryan's presence, her heart racing nervously at every brush of their hands as they reached for the same document or when their eyes met across the room. It was maddening but exhilarating, the confusion made worse by May's keen observations and teasing glances as she whispered to Hiro, nudging him conspiratorially, her eyes sparkling with mischief. With every passing moment, their colleagues began to take note of the palpable shift in the atmosphere, curious and entertained by the increasingly charged interactions between their two senior staff members. Amidst this combustive backdrop, a pivotal moment arrived when Naomi received an unexpected promotion offer from the corporate office. The new position would move her to another department, one devoid of Ryan's ever-watchful eye, a tantalizing prospect that promised greater responsibility and a chance to shine independently. Yet, as she sat at her desk, the glossy letter of acceptance sitting before her felt heavier than it should. She found herself paralyzed by the decision, her mind a whirlwind of doubt. Was she really interested in the promotion, or was she merely seeking an escape from the haunting uncertainty of her feelings for Ryan? The how and when of it all felt suffocating. That evening, as she and Ryan engaged in their usual casual talk about household matters, he casually mentioned his plans to start searching for a new apartment, an innocuous statement that sent ripples of confusion through her. Naomi should have felt a sense of relief. After all, it was the very discussion that had pervaded their unhappy beginnings together. The plan had always been for him to find separate accommodations, yet instead, the thought of him moving out struck a chord of unexpected sorrow within her. She could hardly process how deeply the idea of his absence affected her, the notion that someone who had caused her such irritation had also, in the course of their shared existence, become someone she could barely imagine her daily life without. Here, in this moment, layers of her vulnerability unpeeled as the silence stretched between them, heavy with unsaid words and unexamined feelings, leaving her unsettled. It was a feeling she wasn't prepared to confront, so Naomi struggled to shrug it off with a light-hearted tone, attempting to mask the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. She jokingly suggested that Ryan would miss her cooking, which, despite his usual critique, was something she took pride in. Ryan simply chuckled, his expression unreadable as he followed his comment with a nonchalant "I'll manage," though the glimmer in his eye betrayed the flicker of familiarity woven within their domestic routine. That evening was one of many where light bantering filled their living space, yet a residual tension loomed. Each moment felt charged, as if they were walking upon fragile glass, each step risking exposure to the tremors they both could no longer ignore. As the night deepened, a kaleidoscope of emotions wrapped around them in a suffocating embrace, each struggling to figure out which direction their hearts would ultimately lead them, each quietly yearning for a resolution that remained tantalizingly out of reach. Just as Naomi begins to unfold the complex layers of her feelings for Ryan, an unexpected twist disrupts the fragile balance they have managed to establish in their unusual living arrangement. The air in the apartment feels charged with unexpressed emotions, each passing day subtly shifting closer to an inevitable confrontation. It is then that Ryan's past reemerges, as if summoned by fate itself, when Ayaka, his ex-fiancée, unexpectedly knocks on their shared door, seeking closure after years of silence. The moment Naomi catches sight of Ryan's tense posture as he opens the door, her heart sinks, an uninvited knot rising in her throat. She can see the instant flicker of surprise in his eyes, but more significantly, she notices the way he becomes cagey, almost guarded, as Ayaka steps into their shared space. Their conversation is hushed, the words spoken are clipped yet laced with a certain remorse that cuts through Naomi like a cold breeze, sending her mind reeling. As she stands just outside the half-open door, her heart pounds in her chest, picking up on the nuances of their dialogue. Ayaka's voice carries a hint of desperation as she tells Ryan how much she regretted their breakup and questions if there might still be a chance for them. There's a bittersweet sting in the air, and Naomi steps back, her mind racing with insecurity, the warm thoughts she had about their budding relationship beginning to feel precarious and fragile. That night, rather than face Ryan, she buries herself in work, transferring her worries into the tasks at hand, as the fluorescent lights of the office blur her surroundings, momentarily dulled by the weight of uncertainty that clings to her. But even as she types away, diligently focused on the presentation for a key client, she finds it impossible to silence the persistent thoughts of Ryan and Ayaka lingering in the recesses of her mind. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to her, Ryan is equally affected, his own days now clouded by reflections of Naomi. In the quiet corners of his mind, he struggles against the tidal wave of nostalgia washing over him, attempting to compartmentalize the past while wrestling with the unmistakable pull he feels towards her. As he leans against his office desk, the dim light casting shadows across his face, Ryan realizes that Naomi's presence has shifted something core within him, awakening feelings he had long buried beneath layers of professional rigor and emotional detachment. Days pass, the atmosphere at home becoming thick with unspoken words, and their colleagues begin to notice the shift, particularly May and Hiro, who observe the palpable tension that has developed between the two. With knowing eyes, May confronts Naomi, her voice filled with urgency as she presses her friend to acknowledge her feelings, warning that ignoring them might lead her to regret missing the chance to explore something deeper with Ryan. As the two sisters sit together in a cozy cafe, the aroma of roasted coffee beans enveloping them, Erica leans in, her voice low and conspiratorial as she emphasizes that both their lives and circumstances may drastically change if Naomi doesn't act soon. Despite Naomi's internal battle, Erica's words resonate, igniting a resolve deep within her. Yet, the looming presence of Ryan's past acts as a persistent shadow, fueling her hesitations about stepping forward when here was also the possibility of losing him entirely to someone who could claim the memories they once shared. It is on one such evening, filled with awkward silences and unsaid affections, that Naomi finds herself standing in the living room, staring blankly at the walls that have witnessed so much turmoil and growth between them. The warmth of their shared experiences flickers like the lamps overhead, illuminating her thoughts as she grapples with conflicting emotions of love and fear, hovering on the precipice of a decision she knows she must uncover. In the stillness, where her emotions tread carefully, Ryan walks in, completely unaware of her turmoil, his eyes soft yet distant as he searches for something to say but hesitates, the unspoken weight of Ayaka's return hanging in the air like a string of tension ready to snap. Naomi takes a breath, resolutely determined to face the tangled web of feelings between them, yet as she opens her mouth to speak, the haunting thought of their uncertain future echoes louder, causing her resolve to falter as they both try to navigate the delicate balance between affection and fear that threatens to push them apart when all she wants is for him to draw nearer. Naomi paced nervously around her apartment, the evening air thick with tension as she replayed her recent choice over and over in her mind. She had meant to confront Ryan about her burgeoning feelings, to unravel the tightly woven threads of doubt and uncertainty, but then she stepped out to grab her bag and nearly collided with a scene that knocked the wind from her lungs. Ayaka, Ryan's long-lost fiancée, stood at the entrance of their complex, glistening tears streaming down her cheeks, the raw emotion on her face betraying a fragile vulnerability that spoke volumes. Naomi felt a sharp jab in her chest, a full-bodied rejection echoing in her mind as she peered from behind the door. The haunting image of Ryan's face, often stoic and measured, now seemed less certain, as though he were teetering on the precipice of old feelings, ready to rebound to a comfort zone he had long abandoned. Distorted whispers gnawed at her resolve, convincing her that he would choose the past over the complexity of what they had started to forge together. And in that moment of quiet tragedy, Naomi made a choice that felt like sorcery. She would accept the job transfer that had presented itself, grim and familiar, in her inbox, an easy escape route from the turmoil she saw brewing just out of reach. When she informed Ryan of her decision later that night, she could sense the jagged silence stretching between them, an invisible wall that no longer felt temporary. His eyes widened in disbelief, and for a brief moment, the typically perfection-seeking mask cracked, revealing a sincerity that made her heart race in an unnerving way. He asked her why she would leave when they had managed so much together under such cramped quarters, and she felt the weight of all that had been unspoken pile at her feet as she fought against the urge to spill her uncertainties and fears about their undeniable connection. Instead, she merely brushed the question aside, insisting she wanted to experience different challenges, forcing a smile that felt more like a shroud than a beacon of hope. Ryan's gaze bore into her, heavy with contemplation, as he held his silence, caught between his own emotions and the chaos of their circumstances. Meanwhile, Hiro watched the two of them from a distance, his curiosity piqued by their uncharacteristic interactions. He had observed Ryan turning softer and Naomi's face growing ever more vivid with delight or distress. Hiro approached Ryan, curiosity molded with a hint of mischief as he brazenly suggested that perhaps Ryan's carefully curated life lacked an essential ingredient: someone who could challenge him. Ryan scoffed, but the dismissal sounded hollow even to his own ears. Hiro's words sunk in deeper than he was willing to admit. He had never been this invested in anyone before. As the truth hit, Ryan found himself swamped by the notion that he truly cared for Naomi, the realization both exhilarating and terrifying. Days drifted into a haze, with Naomi's bittersweet anticipation of leaving mingling uneasily with fleeting moments of silence between them. The familiar sounds of their shared apartment felt like echoes bouncing off walls that were now both home and prison at once. Each meal consumed at separate times, each bump in conversation that felt like it smothered the air led Naomi to cling tighter to the facade she was attempting to orchestrate, all the while feeling a hollow ache in her chest begging for acknowledgement. It became increasingly harder to bear when her workstation at the office began to feel colder with her impending departure drawing closer, the colorful scribbles of notes now mere whispers of the vibrant exchanges she had shared with Ryan. On the night before her last day, as she began to box away her work materials, the atmosphere thickened with an unwelcome sense of finality that seemed to magnify every unspoken word she had left hanging in the air. Quiet tears spilled over Naomi's cheeks as she tucked away memories of late-night brainstorming sessions, easy laughter over coffee breaks, and Ryan's thoughtful advice that rested heavily behind his common barbs. Meanwhile, Ryan stood on the opposite end of their shared living space, listening to the subtle sounds of her movements, the quiet shuffling less familiar than before. It was a devastating contrast to the vibrancy they both had come to know. Tonight, they would not simply see each other as colleagues or impatient roommates. They would come face to face with the weight of what might have been. Despite all the steps backward Naomi had taken, she realized that a leap of faith had become essential if she were to extricate herself from this self-composed web of uncertainty. Gritting her teeth at the looming deadline, as she stared out the window at the dusky Tokyo skyline, she slowly recognized that life was too short to let unexpressed feelings slip away, drenching her in a mixture of fear and regret. Ultimately, as she prepared herself for bed, the flickering light of her phone brought forward a message from Ryan, simple yet poignant. His words, heavy and calm, resounded in her mind like a final call: "We need to talk." At that moment, both of them stood at a crossroads, paralyzed by the gravity of their choices, fated to finally confront their shared emotions or allow them to slip quietly into the past, accompanied by the shadows of their unresolved hearts. The day before Naomi's transfer loomed like a heavy storm cloud, casting shadows over her heart as she worked late at her new office, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly around her. She scribbled notes absent-mindedly, trying to focus while her mind swam with thoughts of impending change and uncertainty. Just then, the soft click of her office door opening drew her attention, and her heart skipped a beat. It was Ryan. He stood there in the dim light, a mixture of determination and vulnerability etched into his features, making him appear far more human than he ever let on at work. As he entered, his presence filled the room, and for a moment, the air itself seemed to crackle with tension. Naomi felt overwhelmed, caught between excitement and trepidation as he stepped closer, his gaze intense yet searching as if he were looking for something more than just the words to say. Struggling to articulate his feelings, Ryan took a deep breath, his voice steady despite the chaos brewing within him. He admitted that her presence had changed his life in ways he never anticipated, and as he spoke, the sincerity in his tone washed over Naomi like warm sunlight piercing through a winter fog. Her brow furrowed in skepticism, prompting her to question if this was merely his competitive nature refusing to lose or if he genuinely desired her for who she was. She could see the wheels turning in his mind as he wrestled with his emotions, every calculated word seeming to disassemble the walls he had so carefully constructed around himself. Ryan, shedding the armor of the unwavering executive, confided that he didn't just want her in his life, he needed her, and this confession hung thick in the air, a profound declaration bursting with implications that both thrilled and terrified Naomi. She felt the weight of his honesty pressing against her heart, her instincts screaming to trust him, yet self-doubt clawed at her, whispering warnings of past wounds. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment, Naomi hesitated, her mind racing as she sought clarity amidst the whirlwind of emotions. Just as she opened her mouth, words teetering on the edge of her consciousness, an emergency work call sliced through the intimacy of their shared space like a knife, the abrupt interruption sending them back into their separate realities. The edge of vulnerability that had drawn them so close receded, leaving behind the echo of unspoken promises that resonated in the stillness between them. Ryan lingered for a moment longer, his expression a cocktail of frustration and foreboding, but Naomi could see the flicker of hope igniting in his eyes, a light she hadn't witnessed before, radiating strength while also betraying fear. He closed the distance slightly, and a part of him yearned to reach out, to convey all the things that had become impossible to ignore. Yet, they remained ensnared by duty and circumstance, the fierce inner battles they both fought holding them hostage. As he stepped back toward the door, Naomi's heart sank with the realization of what could have been, and she was filled with an unsettling mix of anticipation and uncertainty. In that moment, she understood the flickers of hope they had shared, that fragile thread of connection now woven through the fabric of her heart, intertwining her feelings with his in a way she had never thought possible. After he left, silence enveloped her, but within that silence was a newfound energy, a warmth blossoming in the pit of her stomach, a flicker of hope for what lay ahead. She sensed that the unspoken promise still lingered in the air around her, wrapping her in its embrace and casting aside her doubts, if only for a moment. As the night wore on, the weight of their conversation settled within her, filling the empty spaces with possibilities. For the first time in weeks, Naomi allowed herself to hope that perhaps this was not the end but rather an invitation for a beginning neither of them had dared to explore yet. As the sun dipped below the Tokyo skyline, casting shades of orange and pink across the bustling city, Naomi and Ryan walked side by side, their fingers entwined with an ease that still felt new and exhilarating. Laughter spilled from Naomi's lips as they playfully debated the merits of soy milk versus almond milk, a triviality that once could have sparked a heated disagreement but now felt delightfully mundane. Their hearts, having danced around the edges of vulnerability for so long, were finally in sync, each story they shared deepening their connection. Just as they reached the entrance of their apartment complex, a sudden flurry of activity caught their attention. It was May and Hiro, animatedly discussing the latest developments in their lives and oblivious to the world beyond their chatter. Naomi chuckled softly, nudging Ryan as she reflected how their friends had been there through thick and thin. But her smile faltered for a moment as a stray thought crossed her mind. Their relationship, once a secret tethered under professional constraints, was now proudly unfolding like a blooming flower. She could sense that whispers of curiosity surrounded them, questions that hinted at their journey from adversaries to allies, leaving her warmly hopeful and slightly apprehensive at how quickly things were changing. Just when she thought the moment couldn't get better, Ryan paused, pulling her gently to the side. With a seriousness that contrasted their light banter, he looked deep into her eyes, the city's lights sparkling in the background like stars. He assured her that whatever curveballs life sent their way, they would tackle everything together, sharing both laughter and challenges without fear. The promise resonated within her, melting any remnants of doubt. As they walked into their apartment, a comfortable silence settled around them, heavy with meaning yet light enough to embrace. Just then, the door swung open revealing Mr. Takeda, the eccentric landlord, with a mischievous smirk and a stack of letters in hand. He declared that fate seemed to have a preference for surprises, handing them a mysterious envelope that had just arrived. With curiosity bubbling to the surface, Naomi and Ryan exchanged puzzled glances, the air thick with anticipation. Driven by a mix of excitement and trepidation, they tore open the envelope together, a new chapter of their lives quietly beginning to unfurl. Whatever was inside awaited to unravel their next adventure, setting the stage for yet another thrilling journey in the ever-spiraling excitement of their lives, blending dreams, love, and the entirety of an unforeseen future. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Happiness of Love. That way, you won't miss any of our heartfelt romances. See you in the next love story.